Good. Thank you, everyone. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, my apologies for the delay. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties, but like I said, we've got them resolved now. So this is the intermediate Checkscan class. In this class, we're going to cover basic Checkscan functionality again, and then there's going to be a few items I'm going to show you for intermediate Checkscan functionality. So before we get started, let me give you a little information about myself and tell you about myself. My name is Steve Jones, and I'm on the Yardi, or the Voyager Cash Management Client Success NC team in Raleigh. I've been at Yardi for a little over 6 years, and before that, I was in property management for 13 plus years, so I can understand and appreciate the field that you're in. So Checkscan functionality. What Checkscan is going to allow you to do is take a handful of paper checks. We recommend no more than 20 to 25 checks in a batch. It's going to allow you to scan them directly into the database, where it's going to convert them into electronic images and accounts receivables. Once you post that batch, it's going to post that receipt to the tenant ledger. It's also going to post it to your general ledger, and it's going to make the transaction appear on the collect processor report so that it'll be picked up and sent to the bank the next business day. So what will Checkscan do? It's basically going to do 4 things. It's going to create the receipt for you. When you post the batch, it's going to post the receipt to the ledger and your general ledger. It's going to attach the front and back images of the check to the receipt. And it's going to make it appear on the collect processor report, so it'll be picked up and sent to the bank. So those 4 things, it's going to create the receipt, post the receipt to the ledger and general ledger, attach the images, and make it appear on the collect processor report. So the scanners that we support, you've got 3 of them. It's going to be the Panini MyVision X, the MacTech Extella, and the TS240. And then I also made a list of a couple of things that you need to remember. First thing to remember is always add up the check amount and count the number of checks that you're going to have in a batch. This will come in handy when you're completing your batch header. Number 2, if the routing and account number has been previously associated to a tenant, it's going to automatically associate to the same tenant when you scan an item with the same routing and account number. The next 3 sort of go hand in hand. Always make sure the amount that you enter in Checkscan matches the amount that you enter, or matches the check amount. So if you enter $10 in Checkscan, make sure $10 is what's on the check. The bank is going to process the written amount of the check. So make sure that the written amount and the numerical amount match. So if they write a check, say the written amount is $5, but the written or the numerical amount is $5, the written amount is $1, it's only going to process $1. Number 5, the bank will honor the physical check deposit over the electronic check deposit. And what I mean by that is, if you process a check through Checkscan and then accidentally take it to the bank and have it deposited manually, the bank will honor the physical deposit and they'll return the electronic deposit as a duplicate presentment. 2 more things. Periodically, when you're working in a Checkscan batch, periodically save the batch information. If you do not save it, it times out approximately 15 minutes of working or 15 minutes of activity without saving. If it does time out, you lose all the information that you've entered. So you want to just be sure that you save it. Just periodically go up there and click the icon to save the batch. That way it saves everything that you've done so far. And the last one, I mentioned this before, no more than 20 to 25 checks in a Checkscan batch. And that's just makes it easier. If there is an issue, it makes it easier to locate the issue and figure out how to resolve it. So those 7 things, add the check amounts, total the check amounts. If the routing account has been previously, routing and account number has been previously associated, it'll automatically associate to the same tenant when it's rescanned. Make sure that the amount entered in Checkscan matches the check. Make sure the written amount matches the numerical amount. Keep in mind that the bank's going to honor a physical deposit over an electronic deposit. Periodically save the batch and don't have more than 20, 25 checks in the batch. So accessing Checkscan. If you need to access the Checkscan interface through Gen 2, it's easy. All you're going to do is click on the AR drop-down, go down to Checkscan, and click on Scan Checks. From Voyager, from the side menu, you'll click on Roles and go down to Payment Processing. Then, that'll take you to the Payments dashboard, where you'll click on Scan Checks New, or Checkscan Scan Checks New from the side menu, or Scan Checks Link from the Payments dashboard. Both of those will take you to the Checkscan interface. Any questions so far? You got any questions, Sam? So we're going to go into Voyager now and just take a look around. I'm going to process a batch so that you can see its functionality and go over a few things in Voyager. So remember, working in Voyager, you're going to click on Roles from the side menu, go down to Payment Processing Admin. It's going to bring you up to the Payments dashboard. You're going to access the Checkscan interface either by clicking on Checkscan, go down to Scan Checks New, or by clicking the Scan Checks link. In Gen 2, you'll click on AR, go down to Checkscan and Scan Checks. So it looks like we have a question. Let's see. That's a good question, actually. Why should you limit the checks to 20 to 25? The reason being is if there is an issue, it's easier to locate the problem check and take care of that check, take care of that issue. Another thing is when you start getting too many checks in a batch, You may forget to save the batch, because when you're re-entering, if you don't save the batch, it's going to lose all the information and time out. So you may forget to save the batch. So those are the two big reasons that we recommend 20 to 25 checks. So we're going to click on the Scan Checks New link. And this will bring us up to the Checkscan interface. What I want to do over here is just a couple of things, and then we'll go to a batch that I've already created. Scanner, the only time you should ever use the scanner settings is when you're initially setting up Checkscan and syncing it with the scanner that you have, one of the three scanners. The Panini MyVision X, MacTech Excella, or the TS240. Once it's set up and synced, you shouldn't have to use the scanner settings for anything. Tape information. So I do want to go over this field a little bit more in depth. The total entered and the items entered, those are calculated automatically when you're scanning and associating checks. The system will automatically calculate the amount of checks and add up the totals. The total declared and the items declared, those are the figures that you added up. So say you had $10,000 in checks and 5 checks. You would enter 10,000 and the total declared and the items declared would be 5. Looks like we have another question. Yes, you can use that's a good question as well. With the new upgrades, there is a desktop app that you can download and use. It's going to bring you to the same interface as this. Okay, that's a good question as well. So for your post month is defaults to your system operating month. So if your system operating month is April, then the post month is going to default to April. If you have the access to change that, you can change that. That's all determined by user setup. So let's proceed. So the deposit date here, the deposit date, that's the date that you want the funds to go to the bank. It's going to default to the current date. So if you don't want it to go to the bank to the 12th for some reason, you would put the 12th in there. It wouldn't go to the bank until the 12th. Date received, that is an important field. In fact, that it determines has an effect on 2 different things. Number one, it's going to determine where on the ledger it shows up. Number 2, Voyager is going to look to this date when calculating late fees. So it's going to determine where it shows up on the ledger. It's going to determine late fee calculation. And the post month, we reviewed this a little bit. Post month is the month that you want the receipt to show up in. If you have access, you can change that. That's in user security. Best practices is to let it always default to the current month. If it doesn't default to the current month, you can change it. So I've already scanned a batch in. We're going to go ahead and go find it. I'm locating the batch that we're going to be working in. Give me just 1 second. As I said, we have been having some technical difficulties. So give me just 1 second to locate this batch. There we go. So I've already went ahead and entered the batch here. I'm going to go over the icons at the top. So the scan button here, let's say you wanted to add more items to this batch. You've already scanned these 8 items. Say you wanted to add some more items to it. You would load the checks in there and then click the scan button and it would start scanning for you. The Save Batch button, this saves the batch information. Let's say you have a resident that comes in and you're working in a batch. You'll want to make notation of the batch number that you're working in, which is 354 down here. And then you'll go up here and click Save. This way you can go back to the batch and edit it, add it, post it, whatever. Close batch. Close batch, what it does is it locks the batch. If you close the batch, it's going to save and lock all the information, and you're not going to be able to make any additions or changes to it. Some clients use this functionality because some users scan the checks, and only certain users post the batches. This is the post button. It's not highlighted yet because the batch is not ready to be posted. This is the delete all button. If you needed to delete the entire batch after you associated it, you could use that button. This is the report button. Before we report or before we post a batch, you have to run an unposted Checkscan batch report. Then you can go in and post the batch. Check details, that's the screen that we're in now. It shows you the basic details of the batch. The errors button. Something to remember with errors, you cannot post a batch if it has errors in it. Those errors have to be fixed before you can post a batch. You can click on it and it's going to list the errors and tell you what needs to be done. This here is the soft warnings button or the warnings button. It's just going to bring attention to something you may need to address. You can still post a batch with the warnings, but it's just saying, hey, look at this, maybe I need to work on this, or maybe I need to change this. This is the scanner settings. Again, once Checkscan is set up and everything and synced, you shouldn't have to mess with that. And then this is your tape info button. We went over this earlier. One thing I want to point out, when you've completed the tape info button, when you load the checks in the scanner and click go, it's automatically going to start scanning for you. So let's go back to the check details. I do see we have one question. How do you delete just one item? Okay, that's a good question. As long as a receipt has not been created, let's say, and I'll show you this functionality in a minute, but if a receipt has not been created, you would just come over here and select the item you want deleted, check that checkbox, and go up here and click the Save button. And it'll ask you if you want to delete it, and then you click Yes, and it'll delete it. And as I said, we'll go over that functionality here in a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and get started associating these. But before we do, I want to go over the boxes right quick, the colored boxes. When you scan a batch fresh for the first time, you've never used Checkscan, they're all going to come up red. What red means is it needs to be associated, or you may need to verify the maker information, or the check number is not populated. So one of those three things usually is what red means. Other color you'll see is yellow. Yellow, you can process the item. It just means one of two things. One, there's not a bank account associated to the property, or two, the amount of the item doesn't cover all of the charges. So you can still process the batch, it's just not going to pay off all the charges. Green means everything matches, the amount matches the charges, and everything's paid off, and you're good to go. And then the last one is blue. Blue means that you've associated, or not you, but the item is associated to more than one tenant. So say you have a parent that pays for two apartments at your property with the same check. When you go to scan the check, that item or that detailed line will be blue, and you'll have to select which tenant you want to associate that check to. So we're going to go ahead and get started associating. With this screen here, there's two different ways to associate checks. We're going to do it this way first. This is your basic general entry. The way it's going to post the receipt, it's either going to post the oldest charges first or charge payment sequence. It depends on how your company has your system set up to post the receipts. So oldest charges first or the charge payment sequence. And we can see here the amount written matches the amount, the numerical amount. So we're going to go ahead and enter the amount. We're going to choose the property. And something I want to point out too as I'm typing, you have Ajax, or we have Ajax on here. What that means is you can start typing the tenant's name, and if there's anyone associated with that property with that last name, it should bring them up. Or you could use the tenant code as well. And that'll bring it up as well. So you've got the tenant code or Ajax. Something to keep in mind too, when you're associating checks, be sure to select the correct document type. If the incorrect document type is selected, unfortunately, the item may fail. So make sure you select the correct document type. This is a personal check. It's going to associate the document. You can see the button turn green, so it's good to go. So this next item here, we're going to associate is for $100. And again, it's going to be Res NC. And we're going to use the T code here. And this here is a personal check, so we're going to associate it as a personal check. And you can see that is green as well. Again, using this screen is going to post it to the oldest charges first or the charge payment sequence, whichever one you have. So for this one here, so let's say you want to allocate the charges yourself, or you want to pay off certain charges other than the way the system allocates it. Well, you can do that as well. What you would want to do is click on the colored box. It's going to bring you up to the payment screen. And we're going to enter our property. We're going to enter our payer. And we're going to click Enter Detail. This will bring up all their outstanding charges. Then we're going to enter the amount, which is $72.30, and choose the document type. Make any notes that you want. Once you're satisfied with all of that, you're going to click Save. It's going to take you back to the detail screen, and you can see the box turned yellow. That means that not all of the charges were paid off. So you've got $100 in admin fees, but only $72.30 was paid. So let's associate this one too via the payment screen. We'll enter the property again, Reso 2 and C. You can use Ajax as well. Enter the payer. Oh. Use Ajax and Selector and click Enter Detail. Enter the amount of the item. This is a commercial check. I can tell that because it's a little bit bigger and the maker format is in a different order. So we're going to select commercial check and we're going to make our notes. Hey, April, I'm gonna go over that in just a minute, how to split the payments and everything for you. And Justine, you are correct. Right now we're going over basic Checkscan functionality. There are 2 links at the end of the webinar that I'm gonna show you that are not in the basic Checkscan class. So we're going to go up here and save our batch, just so we can save it. So the next item, let's say you have a resident turn in a payment and it's for I don't know, an amenity card, but they don't have an amenity card charge on their ledger right now. You can create that charge and apply that payment to that charge through Checkscan. It's simple to do. We're going to go to the payment screen, do our usual entry. And we're going to click Enter Detail. Oops, sorry, I forgot 10. There we go. Once you click Enter Detail, you're going to notice this charge button over here appears. This allows you to create a quick charge to the tenant's ledger so that we can apply the payment to it. So let's go ahead and create that charge. Choose a charge code. Let's just do it to miscellaneous. And then notes, and click submit. So it's going to create the charge for you. We go back here and click enter detail. You're going to see the charge appear down here. That's the charge that we just created, this $3 amenity card charge. We want to pay it off. We'll enter the amount and select that charge. So let's say we don't want all of those funds to go to that one charge. Let's say we want to split the payment. That is fine to do. You can apply it to any charge that you want. But the sum of the payment has to total, or the sum of the allocations have to total the payment. The way you can tell is your unapplied field down here should always be 0. So you can see here, I applied $2 to this charge and $1 to that charge. Or I could change that to $1 and apply another dollar to another charge. As long as the sum of the payment is, or the allocation is the same as the payment, you're good to go. Then we'll save it. Oh, it barked at me. I forgot to select my document type. So let's say we're associating payments, and we come to this payment here. We're going to go ahead and enter it. But we receive this message, cash equivalent tenant only. This means on the payment screen, their payment method is cash equivalent. So we can't post any personal checks or commercial checks to their ledger. So what we would need to do is delete this check from the batch so that we can proceed with the rest of it. And you can request a payment from that tenant at a later time. Another way to tell that the tenant is cash equivalent is this little dollar sign here. You hover over it, it's going to tell you cash equivalent payment only. So that we don't hold up processing, let's go ahead and delete the document, delete the check. We're going to check that button, click Save Batch. It's going to ask you if you want to delete it, and of course you're going to click Yes. So I've got 2 more examples for you. Looks like like we have a question. Correct, John, correct. Certified checks and money orders are cash equivalent. You are exactly right. So let's say you have a vendor on site. I know when I was in property management, we had a vending machine that we received income from. He would give us a portion of the proceeds from the vending sales. So that would be a non-tenant payment. These can be processed in Checkscan. You have to do it from the payment processing screen, or from the payment screen, I'm sorry. Very important to remember, when you're doing non-tenant payments, your display type has to be standard receipt display type. If it is blank, the non-tenant field disappears. So we have to have this receipt or the display type to be standard receipt. So we'll enter the property. And then down here, we're going to go enter the vendor that's given us the payment. Enter the amount. And choose the document type. Make any notes you want. And click Enter Detail. So it's going to allocate it for you. We need to choose the charge code that we want it to go to. Once we're satisfied with all of that, we'll click Save. And that's a non-tenant payment. So last but not least in this batch, let's say you have a payment for multiple tenants. That's easy to associate. You'll still need to use the payment screen.
These came back from a search.
You see this little plus button here? This is what we'll use to add rows. So depending on how many payments that you have or how many units you're paying for, we're going to choose one for now. You're going to enter the number there and click Add Rows. And it's going to populate the number of rows. So now we're going to go in and enter the data. And once we've done that, we're going to click Enter Detail, and it'll bring up all of their open charges. And you see it automatically allocated $4 to that tenant, but we can change that if we want. So you could do $2 to 907. And you could do $2 to 908. And we're going to choose our document type, click Commercial, and click Save. So we have some questions. Let's see what's going on. If we have a couple of items, some red, some green, can we release the other items from the batch or the batch? The batch doesn't have to be green. It can be blue, green, and yellow. The red items would need to be associated, or they would need to be deleted from the batch. In a batch, it can be at separate properties. That second question, can they be at separate properties? As long as the separate properties are sharing the same bank. If they're sharing different banks, if it's different banks, you can't have multiple receipts going to different banks. They would have to have the same bank. Bank accounts. When we scan checks, the receipt batch is created. Can we delay the receipt? You can do that. What you would need to do is on the tape information screen, the day received, you would put that whatever day you wanted. Now keep in mind again, that calculates where it's going to show on the ledger, and late fees are used to calculate, or late fees are calculated based on that date. Oh, there it is. So the question was, when we scan checks, the receipt batch is created. Can we delay the release of the receipt batch to the next day? For multi-tenant checks, what is, okay. So Justine Blue means that there's multiple tenants associated to that one accounting or one routing and account number. So let's go ahead and finish this batch. We're getting close on time. You can see here, we've got all of our buttons needed to post the batch. We do have some errors or warnings in the batch. However, that's just letting us know we've already associated it. So we can still post a batch with warnings. So we're going to report the batch. And once we report it, we're going to go ahead and post the batch. Oh, see, it's going to give us a message because I deleted that check out of there. So we have to go back, update our tape information. Click go to save it. And now it's going to post the batch for us. And if we need a copy of the posted batch report, you can always go up here and click report. It's going to bring you up a copy of the posted report. If you need to delete item, after you posted the batch, you have to reverse the receipt. Then you can delete the item from the Checkscan batch. So now let's go over two links on the payments dashboard right quick. I just want to cover them. The two links that I want to cover are the failed receipts and the adjusted items link. Failed receipts. What this means is the item did not get processed at the bank. Your bank account wasn't credited and the tenant's bank account wasn't debited. So you didn't receive funds for it. Normally, or a lot of things could cause this, velocity exceptions. Big thing is MICR information. If there's stray marks in the MICR line, that can fail a receipt. If the incorrect document type is chosen, that could fail a receipt. Again, if velocity limits are exceeded, that could fail a receipt. And the advanced Checkscan class, they'll go over with you how to handle these failed receipts and what needs to be done. The other link, adjusted items. So remember when I said always make sure that the amount entered in Checkscan matches the item on the check, or amount matches the amount on the check, and make sure the written amount and the numerical amount match. If these do not match, the item will need to be adjusted. I'll give you a quick example. Our electronic files that we send are based on what is entered in Checkscan. So, if you enter $10 in Checkscan, that's what we're going to credit your account. That's what we're going to send to the tenant's bank to try to retrieve back from them. If the image of that check is only, let's say, $5, we've given you $10. We sent that file to the tenant's bank. Tenant's bank says, wait a minute, the image is only $5. So they're going to issue an adjustment, and then we'll come back and your account would be debited $5. So just always, like I said, make sure that all the amounts match, and they'll go over how to handle those adjustments in the advanced Checkscan class as well. So let me see if I can get to any of these questions. We're closing in on time. So Leah asked, is there a report that will reflect the check images for the deposit batch? There isn't a report that will show the images. However, as I said before, the images are attached to each receipt. So you would have to go pull the receipt to view the images. You can research by check number, Miriam. Yes, you can. Over here on the side menu, under receivables, if you click review receipt, we're going to clear the filter. There's a field down here for check number. So if you know the check number that you're entering, I think one of the ones we processed was 144. And we did it for the month of May. It's going to bring up all the ones that have 0144 check number, and you will have to find which one it is for. So yes, you can do that. Again, receivables, review receipt, and enter the check number, and if you know a time frame, you can enter the time frame, but there is a way to do that. So we're about out of time. I appreciate y'all listening to me. If you do have any questions that I didn't cover, please feel free to reach out to your company contact, and they can reach out to the cash management team for assistance. So I hope you all have a good day, and we'll see you the next class.